Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today about King's PhD program in mental health research for health professionals. My name is Nora Park, and I'm the PhD program manager. I'll be administering our webinar today, and I will be going through just a couple of housekeeping before we start. So firstly, I wanted to remind everyone that we are recording today, and this recording will be made available on our website afterwards. And also, if you have not yet done so, please could you kindly mute yourself during the presentation to minimize any disturbances. Lastly, we'll be holding a Q&A at the end of this session, so please post any questions in the Q&A function of the Microsoft Teams chat during the presentation, or you can wait at the end of the session when we will give an opportunity for you to raise a hand and ask your question yourself. Alrighty, I think I'll be handing over to Matthew.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Matthew Hosoff. I'm the director of this program, but I'm assisted by a number of co-directors. I'll get to introduce themselves in a moment. I'm a psychiatrist by background, but you'll see that this program is we're very interdisciplinary. And we very much welcome people coming from lots of different backgrounds to take part in the programme. So with me today is Professor Sandrine Chiré. Sandrine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, of course. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandrine, and I'm the recruitment lead, but also the more neuroscience, translational neuroscience lead on this program.
And Rona? You're muted, Rona.
Apologies, I'm having mouse problems today. I'm Professor Rona Moss-Morris. I'm the psychologist in the team. I head up the psychology department, and I'm the training lead and training and welfare lead for the program.
And we don't have with us two other co-directors. So Professor Stephanie Hatch, whose background is in sociology and epidemiology, and she leads the culture, equality, diversity, and inclusion for the program. And Professor Alan Simpson, who is Professor of Mental Health Nursing, and he leads up the partner organisation and clinical liaison. So we'll be covering their ground during the webinar. So maybe next slide, please, Nora. So just to give you some sort of orientation around what this is, and we're incredibly lucky to have the funding from the Wellcome Trust, which is it awards, it allows us to have 5 years of intakes for this program, and we've had 3 already, so this would be the 4th intake coming up. But what we're doing is recruiting people who've got a background as healthcare professionals who want to do a PhD in a subject relevant to mental health research. And each of these fellowships, so we can appoint 5 fellows every year with the funding we've got. And each of those fellows covers the PhD student fees. It covers the salary at a level which is consistent with your current grade and level. It covers research costs up to £50,000 and travel expenses, including childcare and training costs. So it's a very generous package, and you know, for those serious about doing a PhD, there are other programs which are offered, but this one, if you're thinking about mental health research as a topic for your PhD, we think it's a particularly good one to be thinking about, because we have this fantastic resource, and we also put a great deal of time and energy into trying to make sure that the PhD fellows do well with us, and we're providing a lot of the sort of soft skills which go with doing a PhD as well as doing the research itself. So if you take on this, you'd be awarded a PhD eventually from King's College London. You would also have an employment contract with King's College London. So it's a bit different from most PhD programs. So basically, if you're not a clinician and you're doing a PhD, you tend to do them a bit younger, often after your first degree or a master's degree, and you get a stipend which is covers some living costs, but it's nothing like the kind of salaries which those of you who are clinicians who've been working for some years would be expecting. You are, as a PhD, as a sort of standard PhD student, you're a student, not a member of staff. But in these, you actually are a member of staff as well as being a student, which is important because you're kind of drawing a salary, and we want you to carry on being able to have clinical responsibilities. So these allow you to work 1 day a week in a clinical role whilst you're doing your research. So it's kind of a unique program, and it's something we've put a lot of time and energy into thinking about how it works for our PhD fellows. There's an office which Nora sits in as part of a larger infrastructure within King's College London and King's Health Partners, which is our arrangement with the university and our NHS partners, which is called the Clinical Academic Training Office. And this office is designed to try and smooth over the bumps in the road for clinical academic training. And we know that it's difficult balancing a clinical background and then going off and doing a research PhD. This is quite challenging for all sorts of reasons. And the Cato, King's Clinical Academic Training Office, provides some support around that. And aside from the supports and things we do in our own in the program itself, we also provide access to an extensive program of activities and training provided by the Health Sciences Doctoral Training Centre, which is another infrastructure which sits in King's College London. So you're part of a wider community of people doing PhDs, and there's lots of activities for doing trainings alongside them. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this gives a kind of indication of what the training consists of and what we do. So we'll talk in a moment. Sandrine will talk about the process of selection and what our expectations are in terms of getting you to the point where you become a successful candidate. But if you imagine being a successful candidate, what we've got here is a series of stages, and you can see on the left the years of study, and in dark blue are the 3 years which are funded PhD. Before that, when you're getting ready, there's the recruitment process, and we want people to hit the road, hit the ground running. So part of the application process is actually putting in the PhD project for approval for our governance structures in the university. We then have induction as you come into the program, and we have 2 entry points. One is in about this time of year in October, and the second is in February. So you can join at either of those points, and sometimes it needs a bit of time after you've been given the green light and awarded to be able to organise yourself with your current job to be able to get on this programme. So we recognise that and allow people to join at different stages. There's a whole set of inductions which take place, and we're very keen indeed on some of the generic skills which you need to do a PhD. So it's not just about understanding your branch of science and the kind of things you need to understand in order to do that. It's also thinking about all the things you need to do in any research project involving humans, for example, ethics, research integrity, thinking about wider issues of patient and public involvement and cultural diversity and inclusion. And we include those because they're important in terms, particularly around mental health and particularly around people who are disadvantaged by virtue of protected characteristics and so on. And we want you as PhD fellows to have a good grounding and understanding in some of the in some of the sort of social pressures which occur clinically and affect the lives of people with mental health problems. We also want you to know about open science and research design and statistics and critical thinking. So there's a certain amount of stuff which we do there in terms of offering training at the get-go, and that continues. Those sorts of topics continue throughout the program, things we're interested in supporting you in. And you'll see in grey underneath that white bit, we have 3 different blocks. And the way in which we've structured the program is to think that people doing mental health research will fall into one of these 3 categories. So translational neuroscience research and skills training. So translational neuroscience is effectively the application of neuroscience for mental health. And if you think about a lot of novel treatments and how they might be developed, that's really understanding what's going on in the brain and how changes to how there may be correlates between changes in the brain and symptoms which people experience and how those might be relevant. So we have quite a lot of neuroimaging studies going on. We have studies which are wet lab neuroscience with a translational component, and we encourage applications in that field. The second box is data science and digital technologies, and this can be anything from kind of epidemiological studies, which are using large data sets, to novel interventions where you might be delivering the intervention through a digital method. And obviously that's incredibly important as a means of being able to deliver treatments at scale. So we encourage applications there. And the final group is social science, public mental health and policy. So this is really about the wider context which mental disorders operate in society and what the policy implications might be. So we often have people here doing projects which are looking at patients' experiences in health systems and how those experiences could be improved. It might involve qualitative research, survey research, research which has ultimately an impact in terms of in terms particularly of changing policy or making people think about policy. So those are the broad blocks. Now we've designed that to be fairly inclusive. So don't be too concerned about whether your particular area of interest fits into one of these categories. Talk to us if you get through the first stage. Talk to us about what might work and what might not work in terms of that. But don't be put off if it feels narrow. We actually have quite a breadth of projects coming in from people. At the end of year 1, around the end of year 1, there's a formal process which we do for all our PhD students, which is the upgrade report and Viva. So this is an opportunity for you to show what you've done. You have a Viva, a fairly informal conversation with 2 or more colleagues, and you're either given the green light or given some advice about how to improve. But officially, you come in and you need to upgrade in order to get onto the next stage. Then in years, essentially the project you're doing is starting early on in year 1 and you're carrying it out all the way through. But over the periods of years 2 and 3, we talk about different types of activity which go on. So we want people to be clinically active. You're allowed to do 1 day a week, and that's paid for out of the PhD fellowship. So you can go back to your home trust and offer your services, and hopefully they'll welcome those with open arms. And then there's also a training program which you and your supervisor work out, which is a flexible program of training which is fitted around you. So this may be, this may be the specific things you need in order to do your project, but it should also be things which you need beyond your project, thinking about your future career. And then we also really want our PhD fellows to know each other and to respect each other's science. So we have cohort building activities. Indeed, next week we're having a retreat, and we'll be meeting years 1, 2, and 3 all together, and having opportunities to building that cohort and that sense of cohesion as being part of a group. And the reason for that partly is that when you do a PhD, you tend to be kind of closely associated with a single department, or a supervisor, the rest of their research team, and a department they might sit in. But the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, where most of our PhD fellows ends up in, is a big place. And we want to make sure that our PhD fellows don't feel lost in that big space, that you have we develop a peer group. And then, like all PhDs, they come to an end eventually, with the PhD thesis being submitted and the formal examination taking place. And our plan is to be able to support transition activities and to give you a bit more guidance beyond the end of your PhD. There are potential opportunities. They're not. This is sort of outside of the funding of the actual PhD program. Potential opportunities to support people in bridging them into the next stage of their career. And then we are advising people in terms of the types of career destinations they can go on to. So for example, for our medically qualified PhD fellows, there is the NIHR clinical lecturer scheme. There are other ones for people from other backgrounds, but we also recognize that not everyone who does a PhD ends up being a career academic. People go on and sometimes stay in research and get a postdoctoral fellowship, but also do roles in industry or for charities and so on. So PhD is a good sort of generic training for all sorts of other things. Now, I'm saying an awful lot, but this slide is important. There are a couple of other things. One is this vertical line by the side on the left, which says mentoring and support, and we're very keen on providing that. These are difficult, they're not difficult, but they're complex things to transition to, and we want to make sure you have support from a mentor during the time doing this. And we also monitor progress of our PhD fellows during their studies with us, and we invite them to give feedback as well, so that we learn from their experiences. So I think we can move on to the next slide, please. And I'm going to hand over now to Sandrine.
Thank you, Matthew. Lots of information here for everyone to take in and reflect after. So now I'm moving on to how to apply. So I'm sure because you signed up for this webinar, you have found the website and you have found the application page, but it's up there on top. So our stage 1 is a submission, which is an online form, but if you go on the page, you can actually download a Word template. So you see in advance all the questions that are going to be asked on the online form. So you can pre-populate your Word file in your own time, and then when you are ready, I advise you then to copy-paste everything smoothly on the application page. But if you have any problem, any question, email us regarding technicality. We have put a lot of information there, but hopefully it will work nicely for you. But my top advice is download the Word file template, use this, and then populate the online application. So the deadline is on the 18th of November at 1 o'clock. And then so after that, we have a stage 1 short listing. And in a moment, I will discuss the different criteria we are going to assess from this first stage of application. And you should hear back from us the week starting the 9th of December. And then, so if you hear, you will hear back from us either way. So, and if you are selected to move to stage 2, this is what will happen. If Nora, you can move the next slide because yeah, thank you very much. So, and again, if you can click again. Thank you. So then when you have been told you have been successful and invited then to stage 2, then you will be invited to identify supervisor from the supervisory pool. So again, if you go on our webpage, you will have a section which is called Leadership and Supervisors. And then there you will scroll down and you will see the entire list of our supervisors that we have that have been reviewed for their eligibility and the relevance of their work to our program. So initially, please stick to this supervisory pool. If you want to go broader, again, please reach out to us so that that we can look into that if this is possible. So once you have identified a potential supervisor, then you start, developing a project with them and a training plan that you will present to the selection panel for stage 2. And then after you complete the application of stage 1, you will be given by Nora directly access to a supervisory introductory video. So at the moment, these videos are not on the website. You just have their links. So of course, already now you can explore everything. But on top of that, many of the supervisors have done specific video targeted to this program. If you can go back to the slide, Nora, so just the next one. Thank you very much. So this is this stage 2, so the top right box corner where we have these short listed fellows develop the application with the supervisor, and you have to submit the full application of stage 2, which is basically the project and your training plan. That's what it is. You have until April. So you have quite some time to work together with the supervisor to develop a nice project and a nice training plan together. But what we ask you, so for us to know that everything is on track, is to inform us by the end of January, but usually you will get a reminder by Nora, is to tell us who is going to be the supervisor you have identified. So, and that the supervisor agreed to commit with you, and then you are developing a program so that we know that our candidates that have been shortlisted from stage 1 are nicely set, have found their dream supervisor to start working on their project. And sometimes in the past, we have helped when, a supervisor maybe was not available. We have helped then student or fellow applicant to identify other supervisors. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if you think that there is not this perfect match, but we might help you to find a perfect match. So this stage 2 deadline is in April. So it's quite a generous time to develop the project, the training plan together. And then during this time, then following that on, we have the stage 2 shortlisting, and then we invite applicant for interview. And you should hear back from us the week starting of 28th of April. And then you can already maybe put that in your diary because then it's hard to find other dates. So these are already set. The interview dates are on the 13th and 14th of May. So maybe pencil that being, positive in your diary, that you make it all the way there to the interview. And then you hear very quickly from us, usually the following week, whether or not you have been offered a fellowship. And you will see that then in the stage 2 application form, you can give an indication already if you want to start the PhD in October of next year, so 2025, or you already know it's not necessarily going to work with your work commitment, and then you can start later in February. But you don't really have to decide that there and then, but it's a good indication for us in your stage 2 application for what date you would start. It has no impact into the selection criteria. It's just for us to be informed. Next slide, please, Nora. So the eligibility, so this is usually a big question, so we are happy to take questions, but this is a summary. So if after you reflect and you have a specific question, particular case you don't want to discuss here on this recorded forum, you can send us a separate email. But we have strict rules actually that have been enforced by the Wellcome. So we have to follow our funding body rules. So we are not flexible on them. So this we cannot be flexible at all. But if the definition is not clear to you, reach out. So, so you must be a practicing health or social care professional, and you must be registered with a national professional regulatory body. So here I gave some example, but of course, these are just example. If you are not sure, again, reach out. Medical graduates must be registered on a UK or Republic of Ireland specialist training program, or must be a registered GP. Two things, what this program is not for some people, unfortunately. So we can't recruit fellows who wants to undertake an intercalated MD PhD. So all fellows must have completed their undergrad degrees and be registered with the relevant professional body. And this program is not either intended to support healthcare professionals seeking to combine. So we want you guys that are healthcare professionals seeking to have clinical and an academic career. We do not provide funding for people who want to do a PhD who are not health professional. So if you are interested, if you are not a health professional and on this call and interested in doing a PhD in mental health, at King's we have other program, and we are going to share the slides. So here I put follow this link. So this links to other program we have for non-health professional. So next slide, please. So now the selection criteria. So if some of you have already had a look at the, excuse me, at the type of questions that are being asked in the application form, they are geared to help us, excuse me, to help us select you, looking at to make sure that you want to pursue a clinical or academic career, or at least are curious about this possibility. You should show a clear understanding of how research will progress knowledge within the field of mental health. So this is one of the criteria we are going to assess. And we have designed the question so that we can assess such a criteria. And we are going to look at aspects of your research experience and research potential. So here I put a few examples that, again, that are not exhaustive, but we'll be maybe expecting to see that you had research experience during your undergraduate or postgraduate, maybe doing a project or training, or it can be then informal placement, or actually workplace roles, clinical service improvement, transformation or audit project, or academic training position for health professionals. So, don't hesitate. This is not, again, exclusive, list. If you think that this applies to demonstrating that you have research experience and potential, please, complete the form and put some detail there. The next slide, Nora, please. So this is how we assess the application during stage 1 and during stage 2, which are obviously submitting your project and your training plan, and stage 3 is the interview. So altogether, we assess your critical thinking, and this is more during, obviously, the interview. We look at your training plan, so the personal development aspect, and of course, we put a lot of weight on the project. And especially is this a significant research question, and importantly, is this a feasible project? But again, you are developing the project together with your supervisor, so this should guide you in the feasibility as well. We are also assessing your communication and engagement skills. We want that you have awareness of the context of your research in reference to the social and ethical issues, and that you understand the importance of public and patient engagement activity, and have an interest in developing your skill and experience within that area. So next slide, please. So that is it regarding our recruitment timeline and as well as the selection criteria. So here I'm moving into something that's really important to us, and usually Professor Stephanie Hatch would be telling you about our value regarding equality, diversity, and inclusion, because actually she's the Vice Dean for Culture, Diversity, and Inclusion within the entire Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology, and Neuroscience. And we put a lot of weight in our program regarding equality, diversity, and inclusion, because we want to build and maintain a positive and collaborative, collegiate, and respectful research culture where you can thrive. And this is pretty much the motto of the entire institute, but we have a strong emphasis within this program. So within King's and IOPPN, we have a zero tolerance policy to bullying and harassment, and we have a system in place, and the team, our team of cultural diversity and inclusion provide a wide range of information and a lot of resources, a lot of training that we will encourage you to take part in when you join, to support the staff, students, and our wider community. And importantly, we value our fellows' opinion as well as the supervisors, so they are central to the annual monitoring and evaluation of this program. So we have a student liaison committee, our student representatives that are taking part during our executive meeting when we have our discussion, and they have a big impact in the way we are designing and making changes. The next slide, please. So, so really particular to this program, in our application, we highlighted that we wanted to develop and maintain a diverse and inclusive workforce within the remit of this program. And within this area, we actually have identified 3 underrepresented groups. So we particularly encourage people in this with this characteristic to apply for this PhD fellowship, and there are people with lived experience of mental health difficulties, people from diverse racial and ethnic groups, as well as nurses, midwives, and professionals allied to health. And I know we have a specific, maybe Nora will mention, we have as well a specific webinar as well for nurses, midwife, and professional allied to health. So I think I'm going to pass then the slide deck to my colleague Rona, who is going to tell you about the training. Rona, we cannot hear you. I think your microphone is off. Thanks.
Somebody used to be there. Great, thank you. Thanks everybody. Thanks, Sandrine. So I'm going to try not bombard you with too much more, because some of this is on the website and some of it builds on the things that Matthew and Sandrine have already told you about. But I guess just to say that we do have set up an environment to really support PhDs, because sometimes coming in, particularly if you've been working clinically as well, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So if you look at our diagram here and you think of you're the PhD fellow in the center, we now have a really nice cohort around to support. So when we started a few years ago, we had a brand new cohort, but for people coming in now, we have the full kind of 3, and sometimes people sort of in a fourth year of the program, so that there's a legacy to kind of hand on and help some of the kind of cohesion of the program and the mentorship within the program. We've already heard about the positive research culture, and sometimes we refer to EDI or CDI, which is culture, diversity and inclusion. So we've heard all the details, so I won't reiterate that. And then in terms of these sort of lighter blue colors, I guess everybody will be based in different departments, so that although we have this cohort, but depending on what department, and there's usually specific research groups or particular lab that your supervisor runs, and the lab will usually have other postdoctoral fellows, other PhD students and research staff that form a community working in a similar area. We also, Matthew mentioned, we have a policy of setting up external mentors. We have mentors both within our program, which is one of the directors, but also we have a list of external people who act more as career mentors that we put people in touch with, and then a buddy with one of the people in the program who's been around for a little bit longer. And then I think one of the real advantages of studying at King's is the King's Health Partners. We're linked to 3 of the largest NHS trusts, so South London and the Maudsley, which is often the one that most people think about in terms of mental health. But we also link to Guy's and St Thomas's for people who work across in the more mind-body or integrated care, and King's College Hospital as well. So we have very strong links with those hospitals, as well as the Evelina that links, which is the Children's Hospital, linked to Guy's and St Thomas's. And then around, we have this what was the Centre of Doctoral Studies, I think it's now called the King's Doctoral College. And we heard a bit from Matthew as well. So this is where really across King's, and there's a huge amount of training that goes alongside, and people and all our PhD fellows can choose a training program from that. And people putting your applications together might want to look and see what is available in terms of the type of training, both in terms of career development, but as well as very specific PhD and research methods training. And the King's Clinical Academic Training Office, CATO, which is very specific to this program, then sits under that as well. And then there's, aside from that, there's also within King's, student mental health is a real priority. So there's the King's mental health support, King's counselling, and various online resources and so forth as well, if should they ever be needed. There's the student bodies, which provide substantial support. There's local PhD forums, which again generally are kind of King's wide. And then for each student as well, there will be a departmental PhD subcommittee. There's also an IOPPN committee for people that specifically enrolled in the IOPPN, and then there will be for other faculties as well, where there's a chair and faculty members and so forth. So as you can see, there's quite an elaborate and complex sort of support system that goes around, or wraps around us, our fellows. Next slide, please. So this is what Professor Alan Simpson, one of our directors, usually covers this, but I'm going to cover it today because he's absent. So a very important part, obviously, this is specifically for clinical fellows, is the integration with clinical practice. We fully appreciate that most registered healthcare practitioners need to continue some practice in order to keep up their registration. And we know that our current fellows really value flexibility in being able to organise subclinical work to maintain these skills. So it is possible. It usually needs to be, to some extent, negotiated also with the supervisor to see what's going to work. But we ensure that people have placements and that are going to be important for their future career as well, so that they don't drop that completely while they're doing the PhD. So as I've already mentioned, we're very fortunate to have the King's Health, the trusts linked to the King's Health Partners, and they will often provide clinical placements if people aren't already working within one of our particular trusts, and we will certainly help facilitate that or make connections for people should they want to be based specifically within King's Health Partners in terms of linking into relevant services and social and so forth. If people already have a clinical home outside of King's, I mean, bearing in mind that people will be expected to study in London, but if there is a clinical home that they can maintain, we will certainly support them to maintain that clinical attachment in a way that they can do that alongside the PhD. And we will also work to ensure that there's no loss of benefit when people come and transition from working in the NHS to becoming employees of King's, which is what happens, as Matthew's already described. And then, so there's that aspect to kind of support the ongoing kind of clinical aspect of people's career. And then obviously we need to sort of think beyond what happens next. And that would be, again, when we start thinking about looking at longer term career plans. And people have all sorts of career plans. Some people come in with a very definite idea of becoming a clinical academic and moving into university. Other people really want to go back and take the knowledge and improve the services that they've been working in to have a kind of more research-led agenda. And there's increasingly opportunities in industry as well. So we will conduct a sort of formal mid-fellowship review to support these career trajectories, to have an understanding of what people are thinking and where they're wanting to go, and as much as possible offer targeted support and mentoring from experts to help make that happen. There's also very specific, and Alan Simpson will talk more about this at the specific webinar for nurses and allied healthcare professionals, but this particular advocacy, as we've already mentioned, this is one of the groups that we're particularly wanting to target, who might face additional challenge and difficulties in establishing clinical academic careers, particularly if they haven't had a lot of opportunities to research up until this point. Next slide. Thanks, Nora. I think we're almost there, everybody, if you're feeling like this. There's just been so much information. So again, just sort of carrying on the support, in terms of the year 3 cohort, there'll be quarterly group sessions, which will include things like engaging with NIHR incubators, looking at fellowships within the NIHR and other programs as well. And we'll invite talks from program office from these funders, as well as the KCL research development managers. Those who do wish to remain in academia will work with looking at what the particular opportunities are, which might include things like an NIHR academic clinical fellowship, which ensures that PhD fellows are considered within the annual ACL bidding cycle. We will also look at postdoctoral fellowship opportunities for other disciplines, so with things like the NIHR ICA lectureships or advanced fellowships, and also Wellcome has a number of relevant programs, that are the Wellcome Trust as well. At the same time, as I've already mentioned, we will do our best also support people to go back into full-time clinical roles, because that might be the chosen path or so forth. And then also look, we have a lot of good links with industry and third sector organisations who highly value the expertise that our PhD students bring, and that's often becoming an increasing sort of route that people also think about. So basically post-program support, that we will offer support well beyond the 3 years of PhD study. There are some bridging fellowships available, obviously not for everybody, but there are 4 bridging fellowships of 6 months to support transition or future fellowship applications. We also have a biomedical research centre within the Maudsley that has a similar scheme. We will continue the mentorship through following the programme in terms of these areas, as well as ensure that that there's a clear careers and employability service for 2 years after graduation. So I think that's about all the information we wanted to get through. Nora, I don't think there's a final slide, is there? Questions.
Just a Q&A.
So Nora, are you going to field these for us, are you?
Yeah, so I think we can start with a couple that were submitted as a part of the registration form, if that's all right. So one question was whether a master's is needed to apply for this program.
I can tell you that. No, that's not a requirement. It's desirable, but it's not a requirement.
Matthew. Then the next question is, an allied health professional working in the voluntary sector on a freelance basis, are they eligible to apply?
Yes, you are eligible if you're in the voluntary sector. There's nothing which says you've got to be NHS employed. The key thing is that you're registered with a UK-based regulator. And someone put the question about overseas, about people needing visas, and the same applies. We accept applications from non-UK nationals, but you have to be registered with a UK regulator.
Thanks, Matthew. And to add to that one a little bit, so the fellowship offers funding for home fees only from Wellcome, but there may be international fee waivers available. So we would like to encourage you to apply, even if you think you'll be classified as international student, because we may be able to support you. Let's see. Also, there is another question from a nurse who's an operations manager with minimal patient contact. Is that a problem for eligibility or applying?
No, as long as you're registered as a nurse in the UK, you can apply. Yeah, no, there's it doesn't mean that you've got to be offering face-to-face clinical care.
Perfect. Another one is from a medic who's not currently in a training program, querying whether they are eligible to apply.
So this is a tricky one. We only say you are meant to be in a specific training program or a GP. I mean, the main thing is that they. So I think I'm reluctant to say there can be exceptions, but it is something which we would potentially look at if you want to check in with Nora about, because sometimes there are some specific niceties about this. But I think broadly speaking, we're expecting medics to be on training programs or to be working as a GP.
Thank you. I think that were all the questions that were general submitted to the registration form. If you asked a very specific question, I may be getting back to you by email separately. And I think we've covered one of the questions in the Q&A. Let's see who's next. So we've got Annabelle asking whether the mental health theme covers intellectual disability as well.
Yes, it does. We'd be happy with that. In fact, that's an area of research which is very much under represented. So it's not that's not a problem.
Right, and then we have Pratik asking whether higher trainees in psychiatry who are on a certificate of sponsorship with HEE can get a certificate of sponsorship for this program. Yes, I can confirm that if successful, and we can sponsor you as a King's employer, but that's something we need to confirm with HR on what type of visa that would be, should you be successful. And then Prusa is asking if specialty doctor can apply. I think we confirmed that medics in specialty training are eligible to apply, so that's covered. We also have Anindya asking about the intakes, so whether we will have one more intake after this current recruitment round.
Yes,
Matthew,
we will.
Yeah.
And whether we go beyond that is a question between us and Wellcome in terms of a future competition. But we've got funding for a 2025 intake and a 2026 intake, but don't count on it going on beyond that.
Thank you. And then we've got a question from Rebecca regarding maternity leave during the PhD, whether there's flexibility within the program.
Yes, if you needed to take maternity leave during the program, that would be covered. And that's not normally such an issue. The issue sometimes is of people transitioning from one employer to another employer who maybe are pregnant or at the end of maternity leave. So we need to look at that and try and sort it out. It's one of these sort of perennial things, which is an issue which I'm committed to trying to sorting out. Unfortunately, it's never quite as straightforward as we'd like it to be, but there are workarounds where we will support that. And having made all this play about the importance of equality, diversity, inclusion, we obviously want to support people who are going off on maternity leave.
Thanks, Matthew. And then we've got a question from Jonathan, if it's possible to study the PhD less than full time.
Do you want to take that, Nora?
Yes, that's fine. So yes, that is the possibility. Generally, the student side of things will be 0.5 FTE, and that will be 6 years. And the kind of staff side of things, we try to align as best as we can to that. But that's definitely possible.
But
there's just one caveat there. Oh, sorry. Do you want to say that, Sandrine?
No, I just wanted to add it's either 100 or 50. There is no in between. It's not like 80, 70, 60. So it's like, yeah, it's quite strict on that.
Can I just, there's a level of subtlety about this which just needs to be unpacked. So the first thing is, if you go part-time on this program, you can't be working the other half-time, okay? So Wellcome doesn't allow us to give a half-time PhD and then for you to continue doing whatever clinical job you're doing half-time. So the reason you're doing it half-time is because, for example, you've got caring responsibilities or something like that, or that's the way you're working already, and you want to continue working part-time, and that's acceptable. The other thing is that there's a subtlety between our employment conditions where actually you can, so what Sandrine was referring to is the registration as a PhD student.
Yes.
So you're either full-time, which basically means you do your PhD in 3 years, or you're half-time, which means you can do it in 6 years. Now, in practice, people take longer or less long than that would suggest, but you're either, for our registration purposes as a student, you're either half-time or full-time. As a member of staff, and remember these are PhD fellowships where you are a member of staff, you can actually be something between 100% and 50%. It causes a slight complication in terms of whether you should be registered as a student full-time or part-time, but that's something we can kind of deal with. So, for example, you could decide you wanted to be working, you only wanted to work 4 days a week, or be doing the PhD fellowship 4 days a week. We'd probably register you full-time, because because full-time allows you to be doing it 4 days a week, and you'd be paid 4 days a week on 80% full-time equivalent. And there are variations around that. We try to be flexible, provided there's but we can't support people doing half time on this and half time on another job.
Thanks for the details, Matthew. That's a really good point. The next question is about attending in London. So are candidates expected to be based in London?
Well, fundamentally, yes. You're registered with for your studies in King's College London, and we expect people to, and you're an employee of King's College London, so we expect you to be based in terms of your employment and research in London. There's all sorts of flexibility in terms of it depends on the nature of your research. Obviously, if you're doing neuroimaging or recruiting patients into a study, you're going to be doing that based here, and therefore we expect to see you there. There are types of research which can be done more remotely, and you can negotiate flexible working conditions, but you'd still be expecting people to be fundamentally working from London, and also getting the benefits of the cohort and the training and all the rest of it, which come from actually being on site. So the short answer is yes, we're expecting you in London.
Thanks, Matthew. Zara is wondering if there are any examples that we have of industry roles post-PhD.
Well, quite a few. I'm sure Rona can add to this. Two of my PhD students, who are psychologists by background, have done clinical projects using digital technologies, have both gone off into digital industries, where they're quite hot property in terms of being able to do clinical research at a sort of rigorous level and understand research governance and all the rest of it. And there's quite a market for that. But Rona, do you want to say a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, similar. We've had people also working in actually developing digital products, evidence-based digital products. So it's not only the research side. We've also had people go into kind of industry in terms of expertise within methodologies, epidemiology, statistical methods, and so forth. And increasingly, I guess, this private sector health sort of growing as an industry as well.
So same within the translational neuroscience space. A lot of our King's or our PP and PhD students, move to industry, pharmaceutical companies, or others. So yeah.
Thank you. Moya is asking whether it's possible to be overseas for a period of time during the fellowship, if it's linked to the project or professional development.
Yes,
you can. Yeah, we have a system in place that you have to fill a simple form to say you are doing off-campus studies basically, and so that all insurance are in place, and of course there's consideration of the type of country you go to, that it's safe for you, but that's the reason we have these forms in place. But yeah, it's possible.
And Camille is asking about a social worker working in NHS, whether they are eligible to apply.
So if you're registered with the recognised the list which we have on the details, if you're registered with the relevant regulator, yes. And in terms of whether the research can be done from your current trust, even though employed by KCL, that's something to negotiate with supervisor. I think with a potential supervisor. I think that's in many respects there might be advantages to that because you can maintain your contacts within that trust. I think it's a question of sometimes there are issues of assurance and all the rest of it. We want to be clear about in terms of whether this gets passed as a suitable project. But it's open. It's certainly not. It certainly doesn't make you ineligible. It's something to discuss.
Yeah, especially if you argue that you have access to patient-specific cohort that you wouldn't have within our trust, then you have a good argument.
Thank you. And then we've got a question from Lillian asking whether somebody can apply if they're still doing their masters currently.
Yes. Nothing to stop you.
Okay, thank you. And then we've got Carmina asking whether a lecturer in a university registered as a mental health nurse is eligible to apply. They've left the clinical practice about a year and a half ago.
There's nothing to stop. There's nothing which says that you're ineligible as long as you've got as long as you're registered to practice with your regulator. Yes, I think the question sometimes for people who are a bit further advanced in their career in terms of academic posts, like people who've got a lectureship, is demonstrating to us that the PhD really adds value and that there's a clear research trajectory. So there's a kind of there is a question in these sorts of situations about what you will get from this, which is additional, and that you're going to have a career pathway which is radically different.
We do have a couple more questions. Do we have enough time?
I'm unfortunately going to have to jump off because I have to get to another meeting. But
I can stay for a moment.
Yeah, me too.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ron. Alrighty, so Anna has asked whether a project also looking at physical health would be eligible, and also whether a project on quality of life or well-being qualify under mental health.
So this is a grey area. The first thing is that, this is my area of research, that I do lots of stuff on mental health related to physical health. So it's absolutely fine if you were studying, for example, a long-term condition like rheumatoid arthritis. You wanted to devise a treatment to help people with depression in that condition. That would not be a problem. In fact, it's something we encourage. But there are sort of boundaries around that. So it is around mental health, and I think if it gets too much like something which is a study on quality of life, disability in a long-term, in a physical health condition, which doesn't really pay any attention to mental health, as a construct in its own right, then no. You'd want to think carefully about going beyond just sort of well-being questionnaires to something which is a little bit more, a little bit harder sort of mental health stuff.
Mm-hmm. But the body-mind axis is very welcome, but it has to be, real. Yeah.
Right. Okay. We've got a question from Anna whether the stage 1 application expects the candidates to talk about the project, and I can confirm that's not the case. The project will be only made in stage 2. It's good if you're thinking about it, but it's not asked in the stage 1 form. Then we have Serena commenting that they're not sure if they're eligible if they've been practicing in their clinical post for 2 years. I think that's been mentioned a couple of times already. So if you're registered, you'll be eligible to apply. Then we have Hassan asking how much identifying information they are allowed to include in the application. Can you include names on publications? So I can confirm that the stage 1 is blinded. You should not provide your name, and you will be asked to leave that sort of information out, or if it's in the application form, we will remove it before sharing with the panel. Then
so
we have
also make the effort to keep, to follow the guideline, because then it's a lot of work for Nora to anonymize things if you have entered your name everywhere, or information that can identify you. So the form is very clear, and please follow it.
And then Mudia is asking again about the same area. So since the applications are blinded, for fairness, we do ask not to include protected characteristics. However, some of these may be a motivation for applicant to submit to this fellowship. So could you give a bit more information how to work around this?
So
Let's say
the
they or family member have a condition, for example.
So we certainly see quite a lot of applications where people will mention their personal experiences of mental health problems, and we don't see that as a problem.
No.
Indeed, if you notice, one of the categories we wanted to improve representation are people with mental health, with lived experience of mental health conditions. So, it's not unreasonable to include that as a motivator, and show your passion.
Thank you. Let's see, I think we only got a couple more. I think somebody, so Adnan is asking about supervisors outside the supervisor pool. Sandrine did mention that first we would like you to look at the pool, but we may be able to consider others, but that's something we would discuss with you should you be successful to proceed to stage 2. And just to confirm, all the application forms are available on our website. Segun is asking about the forms. And then we have Phoebe, last questions. Whether applicants are expected to come up with a totally new research topic, or whether the supervisor that they find can suggest an existing area in line of the applicant's interests.
So we expect there to be a dialogue between you and the supervisor, and depending on what you've done so far and how much sort of training and research you've had, we recognize that people will have different levels, and there'll be some people who've been around in a kind of quite research orientated environment for quite a long time and will know exactly what they want to do, and we've discussed it with supervisors before, and others who won't be in that situation, and we recognize that. So it wouldn't be a problem if you said, look, I'm interested in this disorder, or this social process, or this potential treatment, but I'm not sure quite how to formulate the question. That's then something you discuss with a supervisor and refine over a period of time, refine your ideas. You don't have very much time, but you have a bit of time to do that, and we'd encourage that. So certainly encouraged. I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to jump off, but it looks like we're practically there.
Yeah, I think we answered all but one question, which is about chances of success. So we can we'll be putting something on the website to indicate how many applications we get, how many pass to stage 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So you can keep an eye on the website. This will be coming in the next couple of weeks.
And regarding the form, go on the website. You can download the template, so you can find it. Yeah, I saw a question about that. Yeah.
Great, thanks ever so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.